What's going on? Theo Gremminger of Fantasy Points. I'm away this week, but I want to drop part 2 of the biggest fantasy football takeaways from 2025. If you missed the first episode, go ahead and check it out right here on Fantasy Points YouTube, and make sure you are subscribed to the School of Scott podcast feed. Scott, Barrett, and I, most of the offseason and every single week in season, breaking down everything you need to know to crush your fantasy leagues. Enjoy this week's episode.
That's him. That's the OG.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the School of Scott podcast. I'm your host today, Scott Barrett, joined by the great Ryan Heath. What is the point of today's episode? We're going to look back at all of our player takes from this past season, last year's offseason, talk about what we got right, what we got wrong, who were my Exodia plays, what were the hits, what were the misses, what are the lessons we can draw from the misses or the hits. We do this every year. You know, this is what I call my annual self-flagellation session. You know, this is our edge. Is, you know, we like to rub our noses in our own mistakes. That's how we learn. That's how we get better. That's how every year's draft guide is a little bit better than the one previous. And so I'm just going to read off the Exodia plays. I'm going to then give you my biggest takeaway of the 2025 season. Ryan gave you all of his. I'm going to give you my biggest lesson learned, biggest takeaway from the 2025 season, and then go in depth on all these players and talk about what went right, what went wrong, what are the key lessons learned. And without further ado, Exodia quarterback Drake Maye, the Exodia running backs Chase Brown, Kenneth Walker, RJ Harvey, Cam Skattebo, Tuten, the Exodia wide receivers Tet McMillan, Rashee Rice, Emeka Egbuka, Ricky Pearsall, Luther Burden, the Exodia tight ends. There was none. Earlier in the offseason, it was Njoku, Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. I ended up changing it, saying there's no official Exodia tight end, but I did. I really liked Njoku, and then, you know, more and more buzz surrounding Harold Fannin. I pivoted. I said either one of the rookies. My preference was for Loveland over Tyler Warren. And so hearing those names, I have to take the time right here to apologize for fucking noting. That was a bad Conor McGregor impression. The grief you guys gave me, the amount of grief I got for Kenneth Walker. I know it didn't count. I'm not going to try and psyop you guys into thinking Kenneth Walker was a hit or gaslight you, but at least you saw the vision. 417 yards from scrimmage, 4 touchdowns in 3 playoff games. At least you get the vision with that one. And, you know, it was the same thing with, you know, Colston Loveland did not look like a hit until he turned it on. You know, week 8 on, only Trey McBride had more fantasy points. And so we can get into each of these players individually, but I wanted to talk about my biggest lesson learned. And really, this is, I think the best way to start this off is a question, Ryan. You were very high on TreVeyon Henderson. I wrote him up as a target, not an official Exodia. I liked RJ Harvey more at cost, but TreVeyon Henderson. Was TreVeyon Henderson a hit or a miss, Ryan?
Yeah, I want to say miss, but I also don't know. I feel like I could argue it either way. People have argued it either way. To make the case for him, he had 3 games over 28 PPR fantasy points. You probably started him if you owned him in all 3 of those games. Like they were, it was either like Stevenson was out or like just coming off of like a big Henderson workload. So he probably just won you 3 weeks. But other than that, he did very little. He was actively detrimental for a lot of subscribers who drafted him and were starting him for at least the first few weeks of the season. I'm sure we had a lot of people go 1-3, 0-4, whatever, like just by drafting all of these rookies and relying on them early in the season. So yeah, who's to say if he was a good pick or not? I think it's a better question than was he a good pick is like, what can we learn from it? What do we know going forward now from the TreVeyon Henderson experience? And I want to let you get into that, but I really do think it's all about how you build your roster, understanding that certain guys are going to hit at different times in the year and where you kind of take that knowledge.
Yeah. So I have heard it argued both ways, like victory lapping TreVeyon Henderson. He was a great pick. I think he wasn't. I think he really wasn't. So just split it this way. From weeks 1 through 8, he averaged 6.7 fantasy points per game. From weeks 9 through 18, he averaged 17.1 fantasy points per game. In past years, I think I would have said that that's a hit, because the final 4 weeks of the season matter exponentially more than the first 4 weeks of the season. And so I talk about this in the draft guide where, I kept trying to caveat and warn against drafting too many rookies. I was like, oh, this is, I think, our biggest edge this year, but you don't want too many slow starters on your roster. But I really think it was a miss. I think because if you could buy the guy for a ham sandwich in week 8, that's a bad draft pick. If he's getting dropped in more casual leagues, that's a bad draft pick. And there's just this huge competitive advantage to starting your season off 7-1, having great depth, being the one to take advantage of the desperate 2-6 teams in trades, than vice versa. I think that's huge. And so that's probably my own personal biggest lesson learned is I think writing the draft guide this year, there's going to be a new section. It's like, maybe these guys aren't must drafts, but they're must buy low trade targets if they get off to a slow start, something like that. Because what's the promise we make to our subscribers? It's really, hey, read my draft guide, read the everything report every week. You should win your league. And so I think they're better off with it's just, I don't know, maybe some special designation, because it's not entirely clear that this was a bad pick, but I do think most teams who drafted him probably regret it. And this was a weird year. Like I remember week 8, week 9, sort of polling our subscribers, and it seemed like an inordinately high number of subs where we're dominating their league by a mile. We're in first place, had a stacked juggernaut team, which is the whole goal. Like that's a win year if that's the case. And like more so than any other year I can remember, it seemed like that what was going on, but it was also the most teams I can remember in the bottom 3. And so like that's very upside wins championships where like I think that's a win, but because the goal is to win the whole thing. And it's like, what's the difference between finishing 4th and 11th? Pretty much nothing. Although like there's the psychological component of just like, you don't want to be the taco and that sucks. And I will say like a lot of these teams kind of turned it around. For some, it was just too little, too late. Some, have these like miracle stories where they just didn't lose another game and they won the championship. But yeah, I'd say this was a big lesson learned for me is, my time preference being a little more urgent to get points on the board early in the season.
Yeah, and I think you can kind of have it both ways in some senses, right? So if we next year, if there's like a version of the TreVeyon Henderson or the RJ Harvey bet or what have you that we identify, I think we can just be very explicit about, hey, this is like the rule. If you draft this rookie where we don't know if he's going to score fantasy points until week 10 on, you need to take a dusty, boring veteran that could just find himself at the top of the depth chart in week 1 when the cards flip over, have this massive surge in value from where he was drafted, and just maybe he's not exciting, but he's gonna score fantasy points, and you'll have acquired them very often, like at a much later spot in your draft. So Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne were like really good examples of that this year. The year before, J.K. Dobbins was kind of a big like earlier season hit, like just instant contributor depth that you had identified that I still thought was like an amazing call by you in 2024. So I would actually propose maybe either this is just like a section in the draft guide, or you and I just tag team another article that maybe we come up with better branding between now and then. But yeah, the dusty, boring running backs that you can draft after round 6 or round 7 or whatever, that are going to average over 14 fantasy points per game, backfill your roster, keep you competitive, or give you like that 6-2 advantage over the first 2 months of the season. Because even if these guys aren't going to be like these massive hits, massive league winners, which we're so used to kind of thinking in terms of, those are the type of picks that get you to the massive league winners, or keep your team like in the green until some of those later league winners hit. So yeah, I want to at the very least make like an active make an active effort to identify those guys this year. And yeah, maybe we'll just write an article around it to force ourselves to.
Yeah, I also want to caveat, like it's great to pair up a rookie with a dusty veteran, but where Henderson was going in drafts, he was like your starting running back. And then that's just extra draft capital you have to invest in the position. So I think it's different when it's a Cam Skattebo who is round 10 ADP versus a TreVeyon Henderson and RJ Harvey. But yeah. All right, let's dive into the individual Exodias. Who was my Exodia quarterback this year? It was Drake Maye. Part of that was I thought he was going to run a lot more. I thought it was going to be, very Josh Allen-like. Instead, he didn't need to do that because the Patriots were awesome. He had a really soft strength of schedule, and he just kind of steamrolled and beat up on a bunch of bad teams. And yeah, so instead of being, sort of Konami Code Light, he was your MVP runner-up. And my goodness, he was so close to winning MVP. If my former coworker Sam Monson voted for Drake Maye instead of Justin Herbert, our subs would be so much richer. Heading into week 18, Drake Maye had just thrown 5 touchdown passes. He was the MVP favorite the week before that, and then 5 touchdown passes. And then week 18, I don't know, they beat the Dolphins by like 24 points, right? And somehow Stafford leapfrogs him. But heading into that week 18, subs sent me their tickets like, oh, I tailed you on Drake Maye. I bet him to win MVP. I'm going to win $30K on a $800 bet or whatever it is. And bummer for those subs. Came really close to, but I mean, hey, he I don't know how I did it. I'm getting very, very lucky here, but Drake Maye, probably the best quarterback you could have picked at cost. Maybe Trevor Lawrence instead. Actually, I'm Trevor Lawrence's biggest hater, but really went nuclear down the stretch, which I think ties into our biggest lesson learned every year is just the importance of play callers. Liam Cohen is a genius. Ben Johnson's a genius. I kind of think these are the same guys. I don't think Trevor Lawrence became great out of nowhere. I think it's just a great offensive play caller. But yeah, this also ties into what we said on our last episode, which is just late round quarterback is king. It is always going to be king. In a vacuum, Josh Allen looks like a great pick because he finishes first or second in fantasy points per game every year. And he outscores the QB6 by like 4 fantasy points per game or more. But because every year we can correctly identify the 1 or 2 quarterbacks who are basically free, who are going to score, 93% of Josh Allen, it always makes sense to take this late round quarterback approach. And so, nothing really we need to do here is just kind of do that again this year. Is it going to be Jackson Dart? I'm hoping he's going to be cheap and he's just the easy Exodia, but maybe it's Justin Herbert. Maybe people don't realize like Justin Herbert could have been MVP if he didn't lose his entire offensive line to injury. Or it's Dak Prescott, which was, sort of, the new Cincinnati Bengals with their CeeDee Lamb as Jamar Chase, George Pickens as T. Higgins. There's just going to be a lot of quarterbacks we can, at our disposal. So, I think we're just going to go late round quarterback again. And I think even if this is the year my Exodia doesn't hit, we're going to be fine because there's going to be like Matthew Stafford, who you could get off of waivers week 2 for free. There's going to be guys like that. So no real change here on Drake Maye. The Exodia running backs, Ryan, Chase Brown, Kenneth Walker, RJ Harvey, Cam Skattebo, Basil Tuten. Chase Brown, that was scary, Ryan. They're in the everything we report. We're like, I'm so sorry. It's over. He stinks. He's going to have negative yards before contact every single week. But week 8 on, boy, did he turn things around. Week 8 on, only CMC and Jahmyr Gibbs average more fantasy points per game. He was ahead of Bijan Robinson. He was ahead of Devon Achane. What are your thoughts on Chase Brown, Ryan?
Yeah, Chase Brown is another one I went back and forth on in terms of, wait, was he a good pick? Did I mess up here? Obviously at different points in the season. I've just landed on he was good. I think we pat ourselves on the back for this one. He was top 10 by ESPN championship rate. So teams that won the championship in ESPN leagues, he was one of the top 10 most popular players on those teams. 21 fantasy points per game in Joe Burrow's starts. He was the RB4 by XFP per game in Burrow's starts. 26 fantasy points per game in the fantasy playoffs. Like, when we got Joe Burrow, we got the Chase Brown we expected, the every down-ish bell cow that we mostly expected. P. Ryan mixed in a little more than we might have thought towards the end of the season, but the Bengals offense was just so high volume, so many plays that it didn't matter. It easily made up the difference. So yeah, the lesson with Chase Brown for me is like offensive environment just matters so much, which can be a double-edged sword when it changes, of course, when Joe Burrow goes down for 8 weeks. But I'm not going to be super afraid to take those types of swings in like round 3 when the alternatives aren't like amazing. If there is just a running back that's going to get most of the touches on an amazing offense, I think I'm still okay kind of continuing to take the lesson of he's going to score a ton of fantasy points if nothing changes, like all else equal. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Or did you get like scared off of kind of making this deal with the devil with like a lower talent running back, or are you still kind of cool doing this next year too if there's a similar kind of bet to make?
Yeah, guy who catches passes on an elite offense and is going to easily lead the backfield in carries. I'm just going to keep making that bet over and over again, even if we could say the talent's a little suspect. Don't forget that Joe Burrow injury kind of derailed things, and then they kind of built their identity around Chase Brown. The team thinks he's really talented, really good. Moving on to the next running back, which, this goes down in history as one of my worst ever calls. Because that's what you guys have been telling me all year was, I don't know how many times, hey, my team is great except Kenneth Walker's on it, or like, hey, killer team except for Kenneth Walker. You crushed it this year except for Kenneth Walker. At least you guys saw the vision. At least we had him going nuclear in the playoffs. Kind of wish that happened a lot sooner. Was this good process or bad process, Ryan? I'm going to say it was bad process. I did not adjust enough to the horrific vibes in August. I was just like, they're just taking it easy on him because, he's injury prone and, practice doesn't matter as much as real games. But then that's what they did. And, this was a really good offense, a really good team. This is the Super Bowl winners. And it's like, hey, let's take it easy on him in the regular season and preserve him for the playoffs. Or maybe they were just stupid and they liked Zach Charbonnet, even though Kenneth Walker is so much better. Help me out here. How much of this is on me? How much of this is on Seattle's coaching staff? Was this a bad call? Was it a good call? He went crazy in the playoffs. He was a Super Bowl MVP, Ryan.
Okay, yeah. So
I had a tweet. Hold on. I had a tweet during the Super Bowl. I said something like, shake my head, Patriots would have won if only Zach Charbonnet was still healthy. And it went super viral. Like, I really thought it was just like, you would retweet it and I would chuckle to myself, but it went super viral. So like people get it. People are pissed. Yeah. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I was like trying to explain to all of the people at my Super Bowl party just like the Kenneth Walker experience we've been through all year. Like, as he's breaking off every big game, I'm like, you guys don't understand what this man has done to me in fantasy football this year. How, like, yeah, he trolled me so amazingly well. Just all amazing comedic timing at every point of the season to just maximally piss me off at any given point. From the fantasy perspective, I do think it was bad process on our part for the reason of, Scott, we DM'd back and forth about the piece on ESPN so much in August. Like, do we need to pivot from Ken Walker when...
I do want to say real quick, I had multiple sources reach out to Seattle beat writers who were not the ESPN guy who, like, assured me they weren't concerned. But I think just the fact that you have that and the implications, if that is real, it was a bit of a take lock on our part. And I think it was a mistake and a miscalculation, but go on.
Yeah, that's really what it is. I think as soon as there's any signal from the team, even if at the time we didn't know, we doubted the veracity a little bit. Like, I think once that happens, we just need to pivot off a guy. That's where I'm at. I think that's a theme for me overall. I was way too anchored to my perceptions of what player usage would be that were formed kind of earlier in the offseason, especially for like quotes that we were getting around like the NFL draft time, like coaching hires, like Maye. I think as we get later in the offseason, teams find out more about these guys and about what their plans are. It kind of crystallizes more. Reporters learn more about the teams. We have better information in August in general. So Walker's like the big example of that, where I think I messed up specifically this year. David Njoku is another one. Scott pivoted off of Njoku. I did not at all. I just kind of completely just like brushed off the Harold Fannin buzz, and that was a massive mistake.
It's really
just being willing to pivot on usage coach speak in August is going to be really big to me next year. As for like, are the Seahawks dumb? I've retired from arguing about whether Ken Walker is good on the internet because it drives me insane, like in itself. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I really doubt that the plan all along was to just unleash him in the playoffs, which we'll never know because of the conveniently timed Charbonnet injury. I do think that all roads kind of lead to Rome for both sides of the Ken Walker debate. If Charbonnet had not gotten injured and they rolled through the Super Bowl anyway, people would have said the same exact thing. See, it's totally good and normal that they are platooning these guys because he got injured and Walker went off. They're so smart for keeping him fresh. Like, I just don't accept that anybody is doing anything but post hoc rationalizing their opinions on this one. So I really don't know. I think Ken Walker's great. I think the Seahawks should have been using him a lot more throughout the season, but hey, they're the Super Bowl champions. He's the Super Bowl MVP. So I don't really have much room to criticize here.
Yeah. So there's sort of a double-edged sword in reacting to August news. Historically, I've always regretted changing things in a dramatic way based on August news. But I really think that depends on the gravity of the news. I think for the most part, you're better off ignoring everything. But with Kenneth Walker and David Njoku, the implication, if this is real, is so profound that you have to bake it in. If we were projecting a 70-30, 80-20 split for Kenneth Walker, and if it's like, hey, if this is actually 50-50, if Charbonnet's the goal line back, then we're 3-4 rounds too high on this guy. You have to move him down. It was the same thing with David Njoku. So to me, again, it's historically better off ignoring everything unless it's dramatically profound. And so I think that's a little lesson learned on this. I want to say the worst part about my Kenneth Walker miss, by the way, is that we weren't on JSN. You and I talked about this. It's like our love of Clint Kubiak, like, hey, I think this guy is the next play calling genius. Everyone in Seattle is so cheap. Is it JSN? Is it Kenneth Walker? There was like a 3-week period where I flirted with Cooper Kupp as like an elite best ball pick. And so we just went all in on Kenneth Walker and this being a super run heavy team. And so, we could, and that was like the most important guy in fantasy, or one of them was JSN and getting JSN right. But what I think is so interesting about this Kenneth Walker thing is I was asked 2 days ago, or maybe a week ago, hey, Kenneth Walker is going to be a free agent. Even if he stays with Seattle, Zach Charbonnet is not going to be healthy until December. Are we going back to the well on Kenneth Walker? Are we doubling down on Kenneth Walker? And so like my heart like ripped in half hearing this, where it's just like, oh God, do I have the stones? Do I have the stomach? Do I have the heart to tout Kenneth Walker again after he so badly demoralized me this season? Where the subs are saying this is maybe your worst ever miss, Scott, was Kenneth Walker. And so I think this is a lot of what we're going to have to do this summer, Ryan, is divorcing ourselves from the emotion. This is what I always say to you. Like Ryan Heath I coached him up. He puts in the work. He's an elite analyst. He knows what's predictive. He knows what you need to be looking at. And so like once you get to this level, the whole game is just being aware of your own cognitive biases and not letting emotions seep into your analysis. That's the whole thing. It's like Ryan's gotten to the point where he's good. I was just going to go down a tangent, maybe a weird tangent where it's like I'm so proud of Ryan as my understudy. There's like a Shakespearean or like a Jungian archetype of like the old feeble king who just like secretly wishes for his son to slit his throat and seize the throne. And so as I keep segueing into more and more CEO stuff, I keep putting more and more on Ryan Heath's plate. And so I'm not going to do my massive dynasty magnum opuses this year. I'm going to do like one article that's more bullet points. It's not going to be 50,000 words. Ryan's going to do that. And I really think you as a subscriber are better off because it frees me up to do other things. We're hiring developers to build new, really cool tools on fantasypoints.com this year. So I'm overseeing that. I'm reading and editing and conversing with Ryan Heath on a daily basis. And so I think you're going to get a better product as we move and segue down this. But like I make Ryan, I don't know how many times I brought this video up to him, is this Charlie Munger. I'm a big Charlie Munger fan. He gave this speech at Harvard University, Psychology of Human Misjudgment. I watch it every year. I want him to watch it. It's just be aware of your own cognitive biases. Like I love Munger. I love Warren Buffett. They're always like, we're never the smartest men in the room. But we're always the best investors in the room, unless they're in a room with Nancy Pelosi. Why? Because they know the edges of their own competency. They never stray outside of it. They rub their noses in their own mistakes. They're aware of the cognitive biases they and everyone else make, and they're careful not to do that. And so my gut instinctual reaction to, oh God, am I going to have to tout Kenneth Walker again this year? My subs are going to give me so much grief for that. That is misaligned incentives. I can't think like that. I really have to be pure numbers, and it's relative to the cost. Is this a bet we want to make? And you have to throw the emotion out. Ryan, what do you think about all that? What do you think? Can you envision yourself going back to the well on Kenneth Walker? Is that something that grosses you out, or something that excites you?
So, I mean, first of all, like, thank you for everything you just said. All of that is like really, it's really fun to hear you say stuff like that about me, about your belief in me. So that's really cool for me. And I appreciate it. As for Ken Walker, for me, it's almost like hell yeah. Like, I don't know that we'll be in this spot with his ADP, with where he goes and everything. Kind of think the most likely thing is he re-signs in Seattle, and it's kind of this like weird situation where Charbonnet like shouldn't be 100% after a late season ACL tear, but maybe he will be, and that's like kind of the like the crux of the Ken Walker valuation is like, when does Charbonnet come back? How much does it matter? How much of himself will he be? Will the team still want to use him in the same way? All of that. So that is like kind of less exciting to like parse out, which we will, of course, if that's what happens. But yeah, for me, if Walker goes to like the Chiefs, I'm all in. Absolutely. Like, as embarrassing as it will be if he flops again, like with all the emotion and everything, that's fun to me. Like, you're talking to the guy that, okay, one of my biggest like fantasy regrets, and this is kind of weird, is like not just touting Christian Watson and drafting him in the last round of like every best ball draft in 2025 at the very least, right? I feel like the worst thing you can do is have a take that you believe in on a player, or at least when it comes to like a belief about a player's talent, how he fits into the league or whatever, and then kind of say, okay, well, I've gotten owned on this like over and over again, not necessarily through like Christian Watson's bad, but like he just keeps getting injured. They've drafted someone else. Like all of the kind of external stuff was like just against Christian Watson, to the point where I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this offseason. Like, no one's talking about him anyway. No one's really going to think about it or care if I don't tout Christian Watson. Like, it'll be easier on myself to not do it and to not put myself through this again. And I super regret it because it, like, the other end of that is it's my like responsibility to give the subscribers, to give to you guys like the fullest extent of my analysis of what I think of my thoughts and my strategy and everything. So I can't be shying away from guys like that or from those sorts of situations just because it's scary and it's emotional. There, especially early in the season, I will be like an open book here. I was not in like a super great mental state over like some of these calls, Ken Walker being one of them, but it's like some of the guys that kind of took a while to come on, or a month or whatever. I beat myself up more than anybody over a lot of this stuff. So it like, I really do feel it. I really do desperately want to be correct, but yeah, I have to make sure I channel that into wanting to be correct, but because of that, like taking all the emotion out of it, creating like the best set of circumstances, the best chance for myself to be correct the most often, and not shying away from like the calls that are just emotionally hard to make. So yeah, that's a lesson I've taken that yeah, maybe people will find interesting. Maybe that applies to other areas of life too. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts.
One last point on Kenneth Walker before we take a quick break and then move on to some of these other running back Exodias. He's an injury-prone guy who stayed healthy all year. That's when I start, worrying about an injury-prone guy. Why? Because it's no longer priced in. When a guy's an injury-prone guy coming off of injury, that's kind of when I'm more excited to tout them. Why? Because you're getting an injury discount. But we're probably not going to get too much of it this year after a year where he stayed healthy, when I still think he has clear injury risk, whether it's, he gets hurt and misses time, or just the coaching staff is like, hey, we got to worry about this guy. We can't give him too many touches. But so RJ Harvey, I don't know if this was good process or bad process. The team didn't really trust him as a bell cow. He needed J.K. Dobbins to get hurt. Then again, is this good process? Isn't this a bet that we want to keep making, where he got a lot of carries, he got a lot of targets, he was a bell cow, used in both facets of the game, on and behind a top 5 offensive line, on a top 5 team with great game script. So what do you think, Ryan? Because this is one I'm torn on.
I do think that Dobbins getting hurt was part of the bet. At least I wrote that in every single RJ Harvey blurb. Is like, yeah, this is the most injury-prone running back of the last 5 years in the NFL. I would love to, even in what we were hoping this wasn't what would happen, but even in the scenario where Dobbins is ahead of him early in the season, he's going to get hurt eventually. And that is what happened. It took longer than you would have hoped. It did seem pretty clear that if not for Dobbins getting hurt, that Harvey would never have mattered. So yeah, we got bailed out in that sense, but yeah, it's kind of weird. Like it was part of the bet, and that at least that part of the bet did play out. I would still say it's overall bad process. I think it kind of hits on similar things as we talked about with TreVeyon Henderson, with time preference and all of that. But yeah, maybe less bad than TreVeyon, but still something we're going to think about moving forward. It is, if you could trade for RJ Harvey for not a whole lot after in mid-October, then it's like, what was the point of us touting him as an Exodia?
Yeah, and he kept rising at boards, just like TreVeyon Henderson kept rising at boards. And I kind of wish I just didn't write him up and just, triple down on Cam Skattebo, who's our next Exodia in the list. I felt like he was, I said he was the best cost adjusted running back pick you could make. He was, if he stayed healthy, would have been, or just by fantasy points per game versus ADP, was the best cost adjusted pick you could make. And I feel like I was so alone on an island with that. I didn't need to write up an RJ Harvey because I really did feel like having Cam Skattebo was like getting an RB2 for free. But I don't know. Anyway, I don't think there's too much to say about this. It was just a good pick. Everything we argued played out. He's more talented than Tyrone Tracy. He's a goal line back who also catches passes, who's also good on the ground. And, they didn't really have anything else. They had no other option but to, kind of pepper him with targets on top of 12 plus carries. Any thoughts here, Ryan?
Not really. Yeah, you were on an island with this. I'm glad I not that I really tried to talk you out of it, but I just kind of never got it. But yeah, great call. Absolutely sucks that it got taken from us. But yeah.
This is why the prospect analysis is so key. It's like, my model said this is a NFL bell cow who's really talented, really underrated, better than his draft capital. And drafters just wrote him off as dead. And so it's just, that's why, that's one of our biggest edges. We nailed it with Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland at the tight end position. And some of these rookie running backs and rookie wide receivers. And so that's why the work we do in February, March, April, and the work Brett Whitefield does, I think, is so important. So Cam Skattebo was a hit. Basil Tuten was a miss. But I mean, the guy was basically free. And I think you saw the upside. It's like, oh, okay, Travis Etienne, revitalized his career. If that didn't happen, like, he would have been a great pick. But, Etienne was better. And at that cost, he didn't hurt you at all. You just cut him week 3, week 4. I think our only mistake was just kind of holding out hope for longer than we should have. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think my takeaway here is like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. in that I think I got kind of specifically wrapped up in some arguments about like, why would you take any Travis Etienne if you believe in Bashal Tuten? Which I did. Like, I think my biggest regret with Tuten is I just allowed it to make sure I had zero Etienne, or like was very dismissive of the idea of even touting Etienne or the rest of the backfield. But I think I want to be more like open. If I just think like a backfield situation is really great, to just be open to like multiple guys within it. That's not like as great for content. That's not like as clear instructions for subs or whatever, but that, at least from like a personal mental standpoint, I think that's what I mostly took from it. And also don't like, maybe a few Bashal Tuten tweets I regret throughout the throughout the season as things continued to not improve. But yeah, aside from that, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I have no regrets. He was super cheap, and so at that ADP is like, yeah, your chances of being a fantasy difference maker are, I don't know, 7%, less than that, 4%, and so it's like, yeah, it just didn't work out, and it wasn't likely to. But good process, no regrets. And so moving on to the wide receiver position, Tet McMillan finished wide receiver 23 by fantasy points per game. And I think the results were, I don't know, hit or miss, mediocre, depends on when you drafted, where you took them. But I think the process was even better than the results. Like, I have no regrets whatsoever. I think this guy isn't, and he's going to be a player I draft a ton of this year. I think he's so talented. I think he showed that. I think he was so much more impressive than his numbers and his production. Bryce Young stinks. Bryce Young hit 210 passing yards only 3 times this past year. Tet McMillan averaged 20.2 fantasy points per game in those games. All other games, 10.9. I was kind of hoping they would kind of, pull him at some point. We'd see Andy Dalton in there. But that didn't happen. But yeah, it's just, maybe we should have been more pessimistic on Bryce Young, and maybe we should feel that way heading into 2026, but I don't know. I just love this player. I think he's so talented, and I think a breakout's coming. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm with you. He's clearly awesome. He won Rookie of the Year, right? Like, he basically consensus around the like NFL industry that Tet McMillan's a really talented player. I think we were right to be high on him. He basically just hit ADP, was a ho-hum type of pick. Didn't make a huge impact, but I'm okay betting on that profile. It's not going to hit every time because, yeah, if Bryce Young were a little bit better than we thought, if they pulled a Kyler Murray and got just a higher volume veteran in there, like an Andy Dalton, he could have just completely taken off. So yeah, he's kind of a shrug to me. I don't think I really want to change anything with that call.
Next, Exodia, Rashee Rice, easy win. Top 5 wide receiver by fantasy points per game. The only not great component of this is, if you had him and you had TreVeyon Henderson and Chase Brown and these slow starters, all on the same team, you might have been panicking week 6, or you might have been less likely to even have Rashee Rice on your team. But I think this was in a vacuum one of the best picks anyone could make. Top 5 wide receiver by fantasy points per game, going much less than that, largely due to the suspension he was serving, suppressing costs. But yeah, I think we keep our eyes out next time that happens, and put our chips in the table. Pre-hindsight obvious. I think we nailed it. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. I think even still people overrate the games played or the total fantasy points of a player and underrate the fantasy points per game. You can, when a guy's suspended, you can start another player in his place. He was a total difference maker for every game that he was active. He near single-handedly won you several weeks, got a ton of teams into the playoffs, as we talked about. Him as a ESPN league winner on the previous pod. So yeah, would do it again. Always happy to make those types of bets.
Yeah. So last Exodia wide receivers, Emeka Egbuka, Ricky Pearsall, Luther Burden, the rookies. Well, Pearsall wasn't a rookie, but he basically was. This looked really good week 4 for Emeka Egbuka. He was a top 3 wide receiver by fantasy points per game. And then he really fell off a cliff, and Baker fell off of a cliff. I think Baker was playing hurt all year. I think that was a big component of it. Ricky Pearsall himself couldn't stay healthy. Don't know if he was, did he have more than 3 games where he was fully healthy? I don't know. So I don't know. I'm kind of just excusing. My instinct is to kind of just blame this on injury and say we don't really know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think with Pearsall specifically, it's interesting because he had like a couple of massive spike games. He was he was like a top 5 receiver by yards per route run at one point, and then he came back. He was clearly a shell of himself for 3 weeks, got injured again. He hasn't been.
He had 108 yards, 56 yards, 117 yards, and then he got hurt. And so he looked great, but it's also, San Francisco was dealing with a number of injuries at that point in time. I think Kittle only played 1 quarter. And who else was in and out? But Juwan Jennings was hurt. It took him forever to get back. Like they would do the measuring his GPS, and he just wouldn't get back to the speed that he had healthy. And then his final 2 games of the year, he hit 96, 85 receiving yards. I have no idea. It just feels like yet another lost year for this guy. Emeka Egbuka probably, wasn't. It's tough to say whether he was an outright bad pick at cost. Depends on if you kept starting him, deep into the year when, nothing was going his way. The number 1 biggest regression candidate in fantasy by XFP, which is either hey, this guy stinks, or hey, Baker's seriously hurt. Although Mike Evans was productive late. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel lost on these 2 guys, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so. With Pearsall, the biggest lesson I'm taking away is just that Kyle Shanahan can scheme wide receiver production to whoever he wants, even if all the guys get hurt. And I just want that in my mind when we approached 2026 ADPs. I don't know what the 49ers are going to do at wide receiver. Jennings is a free agent. You would imagine they would try to add to the group, but maybe not. If we're in a spot where Pearsall is cheap again and he's the de facto team wide receiver 1, I'm probably going to be way more in on him even than I was last year. Just for that reason alone. What if he stays healthy? Clearly he's capable of producing. Egbuka's weird. He was the kind of the inverse of RJ Harvey and TreVeyon Henderson. Which way would you rather have it? Where he was, you could pretty easily trade Egbuka just as a top 8 wide receiver for a good stretch there in the early season before he fell off. That it puts you in a position to make that decision. I do think in the everything report, a regret of mine is we maybe backed off of the Egbuka as a sell thing a little bit. I don't know that either of us ever super seriously considered it, but we did float it man, he it's all this touchdown production. Other players in the offense could be coming back. Should we be saying to sell this guy? You feel like the biggest nerd in the world for saying you need to sell Emeka Egbuka when he's scoring as a wide receiver one in his first 6 career games. But in hindsight, that was the sharp and the correct move. And maybe like another example of like fade the emotion, fade the fact that people are going to scream and yell and make fun of you if you give this take. I don't know that I had personally quite gotten to like in my heart thinking that was the right thing to do, but it's another example of just shut out the noise. Don't think about like, if people are going to point and laugh at you in the industry, if you're the one on the island for this take.
Yeah. What Ryan is saying is we were writing the everything report. And he brought that up to me and I was like, get in your locker, nerd. No way are we writing that. But he was right. Yeah. I mean, that would have been the great move to sell high on him. And then the final Exodia wide receiver was Luther Burden. And this was more, contextual. Like I said, we write this draft guide and, some of the subs are in 50K buy-in leagues. Some of our, the readers are in leagues where, their league mates know who Adam Harstead is, or they have a fantasy points data subscription. And then others are just, they're drafting against Cheryl from accounting. It's very easy to win their league. It's an 8 team or a 10 team. And so, Luther Burden, at least you guys saw the vision here. Top rookie wide receiver seasons by yards per route run since 2010. One OBJ 2014, 2 Luther Burden 2025, 3 AJ Brown, 4 Justin Jefferson, 5 Puka Nacua, 6 Ladd McConkey, 7 Jamar Chase. One of the most predictive stats we have. Luther Burden on a per route basis at least was great, but didn't really get a full-time complement of routes until very late into the season. Wasn't really a difference maker at any point. And so, a lot of people asked me, hey, can I drop him yet? Is it time to drop him yet? I was like, no, hold out. And, that was a mistake. You should have just, you could afford to wait for the blow up game on some of these guys, but at least you all saw the vision because he really did turn it on late. And that was also the case with some of these rookie tight ends. We'll pivot over to my Exodia tight ends. Again, there wasn't officially a single Exodia tight end, but I did have 3 clear targets. If you drafted early and you read my article early, you would have had some David Njoku. I had some David Njoku. Apologies for that. It looked good on paper, but obviously, he's not going to go off if Harold Fannin is taking the team by storm and is the quarterback's favorite target in training camp. And and also he didn't look great. I think he was dealing with injuries, or I don't know, maybe he just lost a step because he did not look good. And certainly didn't look anywhere near as good as he did in 2025, at least when he was healthy in 2025, but injuries have been a thing for him. But so, if you were reading this late, it was very much clear targets being the 2 rookies, Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. And so we officially wrote it up as Loveland's the better value because Warren got steamed and jumped a few rounds by ADP, but Loveland didn't move at all. And so from weeks 1 through 10, only Trey McBride had more fantasy points than Tyler Warren. Looking at yards per route run, first downs per route run, a lot of these stats, Tyler Warren looked like rookie season Brock Bowers. It was that special. And then he fell off. Daniel Jones got hurt. Offense really took a step back. And then when he fell off, Colston Loveland really stepped up. From week 8 on, only Trey McBride had more fantasy points than Colston Loveland. And so, this is a big testament to the work we do on these rookies. That's really one of our biggest edges because, a lot of your league mates know who George Kittle is. They don't know who Tyler Warren is or Colston Loveland is. They don't know that my model was saying these are 2 freakishly elite talents, 2 of the best pass catching tight ends, maybe 2 of the top 4 best pass catching tight end prospects we've seen in a decade. And so, Ryan, I gave you a lot of grief. I said, we're fools. it was so obviously Tyler Warren because, he didn't need to beat out an incumbent veteran tight end who makes a ton of money, even if he is more talented. And it looked bad. It looked rough. And then again, you saw the vision. Colston Loveland really came on towards the end, but this tethers back into what we were saying about TreVeyon Henderson. It was like, was that a hit or was that a miss? Well, Colston Loveland was free week 8. You could find him off waivers. You could trade for him for nothing. No, actually, he's probably just off waivers in just about every league. And so I do think there's a little bit of a lesson learned here of, guys where there's a bigger roadblock to full-time playing time. Yeah, devalue them because, it's a full season you're playing out. And yeah, so, at the end it looked like, hey, these were 2 of the best picks he could have made. But factoring that in, I don't know. I screw it. These were hits. Do you agree, Ryan? What's going on here?
Yeah, no, it's just really weird. I put in my article, I put Loveland into my because
it's like who were the tight end hits besides Trey McBride?
Yeah,
Was it just Warren and Loveland?
That's really it. Yeah, Warren was the only one over.
Tucker Kraft.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever drafted Tucker Kraft, you got screwed by injury. He was awesome, and we debated that too, where it's like the ball test. Like he looks like a freak. George Kittle's my favorite player ever. You can't comp anyone to him, but he looks like a George Kittle clone. But yeah, he got hurt. So what are you left with? That speaks to how weird and tough the tight end position is, where we talk about oligarch tight ends, where it's just 1, 2, or 3 guys and then a bunch of peasants.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, tight end was just kind of weird and variable outside of McBride this year. In my article, where I listed off all of my hits and misses, good process, bad process, I put Loveland into the bucket of good process, unideal results. Because Scott, I don't know if you remember, but there were reports in early August that Cole Kmet was just running behind Loveland with the 2s early in training camp. Yeah. And I think that was what really made me say, okay, I'm going out on a limb for Colston Loveland in that case. It sounds like he's just going to be the every down starting tight end at that point. And that in week 1, we very quickly learned that was not the case. And I was like, oh crap, this is not going to go how we expected. But yeah, in the end, it took until week 16 for him to even get to 60% of the routes. From then on, he had 17.2 fantasy points per game, 34% first read target share. That was the highest, would have been the highest in the league. That was higher than Trey McBride over the season. So yeah, he's amazing, and we identified that. But yeah, there is something to. I don't know if we could have. It's hard for me to say. I don't know if we could have known this for Loveland, because it feels like everyone else in the industry did. That was the consensus take of, yeah, maybe he's really good, but he's got to fight off Cole Kmet. For whatever reason, I guess I just really zeroed in on that one beat report of, I actually don't need to worry about Loveland's early season playing time, when he was, in hindsight, clearly the guy we did. So yeah, I don't super know what to take from that. I also think it's a late round tight end. A lot of them aren't going to hit anyway. Was it the worst impact it could have had on your season was just being too stubborn to let go and not picking up other guys because he's rotting on your bench, because you're mad about it through the first 10 weeks of the year, essentially. So yeah, I don't know. I wish I had better tight end takeaways. This is why I just wrote a bunch about Trey McBride in my article when it came time to do a tight end overview.
Yeah, this is important too. It's if you're drafting, our Exodia is Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, that means you're not wasting draft capital on TJ Hawkinson, on Mark Andrews, on Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, who taking them there instead of a wide receiver or running back is really hurting your roster. So just the fact that you're avoiding those landmines, that's sort of a big hit. It's hard to find And a lot of people drafted both. So like Tyler Warren in the first half plus Colston Loveland in the second is a killer combination. I think all in all, this is a good year. This wasn't my best ever year like 2019 where just, the Exodias were just the 5 best picks you could have made. But this was, I think, a really good year. If you want to, pull up some of our competitors around the industry, I think this is a way better list than what they gave you. But there's always room for improvement, and that's why we do this. That's, we have a million projection calls ahead of us, a lot of debates, a lot of articles, and I'm just really excited for 2026. Ryan, anyone I'm missing? This was largely my Exodias. We didn't talk about round 1, round 2. As a general rule, you're not allowed to be an Exodia if you're in there, but we were both extremely high on Devon Achane. I think that was, we agreed, like, our round 2 target. Otherwise, round 1, I think we nailed the running backs. It was Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, CMC. I don't think we were too high on Saquon. I don't know. Any final thoughts? What about your Exodias? Any round 1, round 2 guys you want to hit on?
Yeah, I was very glad that I think both pushed Saquon pretty far back in our rankings in round 1. That's probably like the biggest thing you needed to avoid there. The rest of the running backs were largely pretty good. Puka Nacua was the guy that I was the highest against consensus compared to in round 1. That worked out pretty well. You would have preferred to have most of the running backs, but yeah, Nacua, just an elite per route producer his entire career, an elite per game producer his entire career. Was really only falling in drafts because of like the Matthew Stafford immortal chamber, which is so that's like what we were freaked out about in August. That feels like a different world, but yeah, he was falling, and we were telling people to take him, and I think that was the correct move, especially like at the 1-2 turn. The Puka Achane starts worked out very well. I think like the biggest like lesson from these like earlier rounds, like my like Exodias, as you might call them, my must draft picks in this area is with Devon Achane specifically. He had I believe it was like a calf injury that he got either in training camp or the final preseason game. It was widely reported as like this is like a 1 to 2 week injury. He'll be ready for the opener. But literally because that was what the 49ers said about Christian McCaffrey, was that it was a calf injury going into 2024, when we actually found out in the opener, actually his Achilles are destroyed. He's not going to play this year. He's flying to Europe for like the super special whatever Achilles reconstruction stuff. When Jordan Mason found out early that he was going to be the starter and let that slip, like that whole disaster, I think is literally what scared a lot of people off Devon Achane in August, just because it happened to be, it's a calf injury. What if it's an Achilles? What if they're lying to us? And I put out like a tweet thread on this, but guys, there are so many injuries and bumps and bruises and things that we do not know about overall in the NFL, and especially before week 1, before these teams actually have to do official injury reports, to like start fading guys with like minor injuries that should be ready for the start of the season, like typical types of injuries like that they sustain in August. That's like bad process to me, because there's an information asymmetry. Like, we know about a handful of them if they happen to happen in a preseason game, or if the beat reporters happen to do their jobs. But there's going to be so many we don't know about, or that we will never know about until he has surgery in the following offseason. Like, that you have to know when you have imperfect information, and not like resist the temptation to act on like the little bits that you do have, when there could be so many other guys that are currently injured, like leading up to week 1. So that's going to be like a big drum that I bang again next year, is like, don't change your entire approach, your entire draft list because somebody tweaked their calf or tweaked their ankle or whatever in practice. Like, you would not freak out if this was week 5 and he did this and maybe he'd miss one game or maybe he'll be ready for it. Like, just think of it like that. Got to understand, again, we don't know everything. We don't know a lot of the injuries. Teams will just lie to us if they can. So yeah, don't over-index on those kind of reports in August.
Well, there you have it, folks. Let us know if there's anyone we missed. If we had some bad calls, you could rub our noses in it. If we had some good ones, you can give us our props. Any lessons learned that you have, you can let us know in Discord, on YouTube, in the comments section, on Twitter. But most of all, just thank you for being a Fantasy Point subscriber or listener. And we're excited to do this again next year. I'm excited to find some new Exodias for you. Yeah, thanks for listening.